Hey guys, what is up? It's 100 degrees in this greenhouse. It's over 100 degrees in this greenhouse. It's 40 degrees Celsius. It's hot. My brassicas look like they're struggling. They're looking really puny, and I think it's because of the heat. So even though those brassicas are really small, I'm actually going to start hardening them off and putting them outside a little bit every day to get ready to go into the beds. You can move things out when they're small. When you're starting them indoors, you're just trying to get a head start on things. I started those late, and they struggled out here without having additional light and all the snow and the overcast. So I'm just going to start hardening them off and put them outside. And right now I'm going to be direct sowing more stuff in the garden, which is also okay. In fact, that's what I'm doing today. Got a pocket full of seeds here. All of these are cold hardy things that can handle some low temperatures. And I am putting these seeds in my big garden. It's kind of late in the afternoon, so it's a little bright out here, but I knew I wanted to get out here while it was warm and do this. Not because that matters for the seeds, but I'm cold-natured. So as you can see, it's a beautiful late winter day. Check out all my onions, still looking good. I'm so thankful for that. It looks like they all survived the cold. Some of the edges around the parsley died back, but it's got lots of fresh growth there around the middle. And though Artie definitely took a beating, my artichoke, as you can see, he's still kicking. And though it looks like a nasty, mushy zombie plant, down at the bottom, there are new leaves. The garden is so extraordinarily resilient. I just don't think we give it enough credit. So I'm going to tell you some of the things. I grabbed a bunch of seeds. This is not everything that I'm direct sowing. It's just what I'm trying to direct sow today. I might need to lay some of these wind chimes down because it's very windy and I don't know if you guys are going to be able to hear me. I love that sound. It's actually one of the happiest sounds in the world to me. And as we move away from right here in the middle, I will lower the little things down that make the sound because I love the garden to be filled with wind chime noise. But every time that I film here, people tell me I can't hear you. All right, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I'm direct sowing today. This is not an exhaustive list. I will direct sow more things. I just knew I couldn't do them all today, and this is all the seeds I could fit in my pocket. So this is not everything. I've got these Dara flowering carrots. This is not something that I'm planting to eat. I'm just throwing these in the cottage garden because they're really beautiful. They just add a lot of height and beauty. Dara flowering carrots are a wild carrot, much like Queen Anne's lace. You may recognize them as Queen Anne's lace. I actually don't know that they're the same variety as Queen Anne's lace. They may be, but I know if not, they're extremely closely related. So I've got a few different kinds of radishes here, and I'm going to be throwing in several of these. I've got some giant of Sicily radishes, French breakfast. French breakfast radishes, though they are a more popular variety, are my favorite of all radishes to grow. I like all radishes, but I like French breakfast. Their flavor stays pretty mild and their skin stays pretty soft, and I just like the look of them. And they're usually ready during this time of year. It takes a little bit longer. We'll probably start harvesting them in about 4 or 5 weeks, but in a couple of months you'll be able to grow them in like 3 weeks. They grow super fast. These radishes are called flamboyant, and they're really neat looking, long, thin ones. I'm also sowing a few different kinds of beets today. Early Wonder, which is a really good beet for harvesting some greens from them as well. So just gonna direct sow these. Sometimes I start them, sometimes I direct sow them. Either one works. As well as Crosby's Egyptian. I'm doing some more Navone yellow rutabagas, which is a favorite of mine. I grew a lot of those in the high tunnel. You would think I was rutabaga out, but as soon as I decide not to plant any, because we've had so many over the last several months, I'll miss them terribly, and I wish that I had. So I figured it wouldn't hurt anything to give them a little bit of space. They'll be harvested here in a few months, and there'll still be plenty of time to succession sow. So all of these things that I'm putting in today, lots of root vegetables, greens. I'm gonna grow some peas. I actually forgot to bring those down. A lot of these things I'm planting now at the beginning of March, direct seeding in the garden. These things will start to go to seed or be done because it's too hot for them in June, which will be just the right time for me to clear these out in succession, sow things like green beans and squash that grow really quickly in the spaces where these were. I'm gonna sow some turnips today as well as the rutabagas. Again, I've had a lot of those. You know, I'm gonna try a couple different varieties. I've got a Haida Benny Red, and I actually forgot one inside. It's a white one, and I can't think of what it's called, but it's supposed to be really sweet. So I'm doing more kale, surprisingly as well. I still have a lot back in the high tunnel. Again, probably don't need it, but I am gonna wanna put tomatoes back in the high tunnel once middle of May rolls around. And so my thought is if I go ahead and put these in the ground up here now, they should be coming really to the fullness around the time I'm gonna wanna take those out there out. And these won't last super far into the summer up here. I usually start really dealing with like cabbage loopers and just really, the kale starts getting bitter when it starts getting hot, but it will extend how long I'm able to harvest kale by a little bit, by about a month or so. And this is a Baltisk Rod purple kale and rainbow lacinato kale. Both of these they're new to me varieties, and a lot of times when it comes to things like this, these might be extremely similar to something else I've grown under another name. But when I saw these, I thought I would give them a try. I've got a few lettuces, particularly Marvel of Four Seasons. I like planting that one out in the garden in spring because it tends to hold on through the weather warming up better than some of the others. And I'm also planting out some herbs today, like oregano, parsley, and dill, all of which can handle a mild freeze, so it'll be okay for those to go ahead and get started. As you saw my other parsley, that's a curly leaf parsley. I'm planting a flat leaf one today, but I mean, it lived through very cold temperatures. And I'm planting a few different kinds of calendula. I'm gonna go ahead and spot that around the garden. Calendula is a really useful flower because it's good for skincare, but it is also really awesome because it will open up and begin flowering sometimes before our last frost date has even come, so it can withstand a freeze. And so it's a benefit because it's going to bring value for the pollinators in the garden before a lot of other frost tender flowers are able to even be planted. Same thing for chamomile. Chamomile's a really slow grower. I usually do direct seed it around this time, and it won't really take off until after the weather warms up. It won't start flowering, but then again, it will be more established in flowering earlier than the things that I plant from seed after the frost ends. Hey Toby, what's up, man?
Hello.
How are you?
I'm pretty good.
Pretty good? Well, I'm about to plant some seeds. Seeds sound good? Another thing I've decided to try sowing from seed today is some cabbages. I'm not gonna sow a lot because I don't have super high hopes that they're gonna do very well. In the past, whenever I have tried to grow cabbages in the spring, even from started plants, there hasn't been enough time because it'll get really warm and send them to seed. But I don't know. I keep hearing people talk about how, you know, it might be cooler, you know, the winter was cooler and the year might be cooler. Some people are saying they think it's gonna be a warmer summer than usual. And my thought is, what would it hurt to give a few square feet of garden space to some cabbage seeds just to see? I'm gonna do an early variety, early Jersey Wakefield. And while I don't have high hopes that I'll be harvesting cabbages this spring, or at least very large cabbages that are gonna feed us a lot, I don't know, it's worth an experiment. I'd just like to see. And like the worst thing that can happen is that it doesn't work and I'll be pulling them out, you know, sprouted or ate up by bugs at the end of May, which will still leave me plenty of time to replant that space. So one thing that I really keep in mind whenever I'm deciding how to plant early spring things, like the cold hardy things, is I'm thinking about what's going to go in this garden in the summer, because I don't want anything I plant now to hinder my plans for the summer. For instance, I have these trellises. Actually, these fell down. I've got to replace the ties on those and put them back up. But these are going to be where my tomatoes are. And if you have an established space like this, like I have these rows for tomatoes, you can handle that one of two ways. Now, I could just leave it completely blank and just make sure that this side of these beds has enough space for me to put my tomatoes in, which I'll be planting in about a month and a half. About 6 weeks I'll be moving those out. They're started inside, they just sprouted today. Now I could also keep in mind when I'm planting under these trellises that I'm gonna be planting things in 6 weeks, and I could just plant all underneath here with things like radishes, with beets that I could harvest when they were really small, and that way I can maximize this space. And you might want to consider doing something like that if you're working with a smaller garden space. Like right now, for me, it's about 4 to 6 weeks before my last frost date, so that's the perfect time for me to sow out root vegetables, especially those quickly developing ones. And things with like beets, now I could leave those in the garden for 3 months and harvest them when they were larger, and I would get more, you know, food for each seed that was sown, but it would take up more space in the garden for longer. Whereas if I were to sow them underneath my tomato rows, I could even maybe harvest enough to make space to plant my tomatoes and let the beets around them go a little bit longer as the tomatoes grow up. And once they're big enough to be shading that area, then I can harvest the rest of the beets. Now I don't particularly have a need to do that because I have a lot of space. So for me, I probably won't stick anything underneath there, but that is something to consider. You can totally maximize your space. Now over here in this bed, in my mental garden plan, I know that I want to fill this bed with zinnias. I've got lots of different varieties of zinnias, and I've decided to recklessly sow an entire bed of them just because I've got this space too, and it's something I think will be really beautiful right here in the front of the garden. I've got this random brassica here that is a survivor, made it through our cold snap. That's going to come out, and this bed is going to be all zinnias. Now the zinnias will need to be direct sown like right after our last frost date. And since I'm going to fill that whole bed up with them, I'm not going to plant anything in there now because I'll just be having to harvest something early. Oh dang, I dropped a bunch of my seeds and just came back on them. There, why didn't you pick them up for me? Does anybody like ever really wish their dog had opposable thumbs? I don't know, I guess that would probably cause more problems than it would be help. Not with you though, Bear. You would never be trouble, would you? I actually think I'm gonna pull all these seeds out because I'm dropping them all over the garden. Another thing I definitely keep in mind when I'm planting the late winter crops is how much I plant in one area that's going to be pulled out early summer, just so that I'm not leaving a lot of really massive spaces in the garden. Now this is totally preference. In fact, some of you that prefer things more orderly may even like this, but like for instance, I don't want to plant this whole bed with stuff that's going to be going to seed or being harvested in the end of May, because then what's going to happen is the rest of the garden is getting really lush. I'm going to have this one really empty bed that I've just reseeded, and that might be a perk for you. You might like to do things blocked that way. I personally like for the garden to feel more balanced, so I usually try to space out, like I'll do a row over here of turnips and rutabagas next to a big empty space that I'm going to plant next month, so that whenever I'm harvesting the turnips and rutabagas, whatever I plant next month is growing up next to it, and there's not like big open empty spaces. Again, that's purely preference, but that's my preference, and that's how I do it because this is my garden. These seeds that I'm sowing, I just noticed that the back of the seed package says that these were packaged for 2018. So these are 3-year-old seeds. That's not a problem at all. I am going to sow them just a little bit thicker than I might if it was a brand new package of seeds. I don't actually anticipate that there will be a problem with the germination rate. 3-year-old seeds usually germinate pretty well. I store my seeds in my basement where it stays relatively cool. We have a dehumidifier that runs down there, so it's not super wet or humid. So I actually don't think that it will be a problem at all. But sometimes I'll do that if I notice I'm using seeds that are a little bit older. I'll just make up for it. I might be making more work for myself. I might have to thin these a little bit more. But we'll just see here, you know, in a week or two if that's the case. We'll see how they come up. Another thing that I consider whenever I'm putting my garden in, again, this is for aesthetic, this is not strictly necessary, is I really consider the height of what I'm planting. So right here I'm putting these beets in, and this is going to be a row right here. You can see my pavilion is on this side, and this is the inside of the bed right next to my pavilion. And I typically like to plant kind of lower things right here because when I'm sitting in this pavilion, I like looking out over the garden. And I actually have my tall trellis down on the other side where I can plant beans, and on the other side of this pavilion I have my tomato walls. So I've purposely created kind of like a hemmed in feel where when you're in the garden you don't really feel surrounded by a road and, you know, all the farm. Of course you have the animals that way, which you can see, and usually I plant something fairly tall down this side, like sunflowers or something that sort of blocks off the house. That's not necessary for growing food. I'm just trying to create a place that's beautiful to be in and enjoyable. So in this particular space, I usually go for something that's a little more low profile. So when I'm sitting in my pavilion, I can take in as much of my garden as possible. Hey Ben, I left a book for you on the island in there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And you know, sometimes I'll tell you guys these things like, oh, I like to do this. And you could probably look back over the years of my garden and see where I did it differently. I actually planted corn here last year. It was like a dwarf corn, but it was kind of tall. And sometimes I'll try something new. And a lot of times that's what it takes to go back and go, no, I really liked it better whenever I could see through that space. I liked it better when that was a little more open. And here I am back to planting something low profile. That's what I love about the fact that every season you get a do-over. Every year you get a do-over. And I love having like a really long-term viewpoint on the garden because, you know, when I get into a season and I realize, oh, I wish I had done something differently and I don't have the time to redo it, you know, next year doesn't feel that far off. It makes your failures sting a little less. It makes the pressure that you can sometimes imagine when you're planting your garden not feel so severe. I mean, what is with that? Like, I seriously can't even tell you how many times I have agonized over the garden plan, like, I gotta get this right. If I don't get this right, what did I think was gonna happen? Like, so far, I have completely screwed up in my garden plan. There have been years where I tanked. I didn't get a single eggplant because the flea beetles were so bad, or I didn't get good peppers because I put them out too early, or the tomatoes got blight in June because I planted them too close together and didn't prune them enough. And I mean, like, over and over through my experience in the garden, I can look back at things that didn't go well, or I planted something I didn't like in a certain space, or I planted the cuckoozy gourd and it just took over the entire pavilion. You know, things that I'm like, oh, gonna rethink that, do it a little differently next time. It never ruined the gardening year. It never ruined the garden. It's just hilarious to me how much I used to agonize over the right spacing, the right planting, the right number, the right seeds, doing it exactly right. And looking back on all my years of gardening, knowing that I really screwed some stuff up, I cannot pinpoint a single time that I would willingly say, oh, I did that completely wrong. Because I don't think I did. I learned. I've also learned about myself that sometimes I just insist on learning lessons over and over again. Like, I keep planting yellow pear tomatoes. They do not do well in my garden. They get sick every single time. I've tried seeds from other places, but people keep recommending them, so I keep trying them, and I should just learn that doesn't work for me. There are things that I might recommend that you try and be like, ugh, I don't like this, or I don't like how this grows, or this didn't do well in my garden. I think we should trust the lessons we learn more. Like, I should stop planting yellow pear tomatoes, and it's okay if you don't like something that I do. I have such sweet memories of each year's garden. It's, you know, it's different every year. And when it's fresh like this, the beginning of the season, and I'm getting ready to just put new stuff in, when I start seeding stuff or transplanting, and I'm deciding what to put where, I just remember different, like, seasons past, and I'll remember what was there. Like, in this place that I'm planting these French breakfast radishes, one year my friend Natalie from Hey It's a Good Life came to visit, and she planted a whole patch of zinnias right here. They were so pretty, these queen lime zinnias. She took like some of the seeds of each color of that variety. There were like a few different queen lime colors, and she mixed them all together, and it created this really beautiful antique-y collection of zinnias that all grew close together. And it ended up being one of my favorite parts of the garden. And also in this bed a few years ago, Jeremiah's mom, when she was still alive, Jana, she helped me garden, and she planted dragon tongue bush beans right here. And I remember her being meticulous to make sure she planted the beans about 4 inches apart, because that's what I told her to do, and she did such, they were like perfect. And I don't know, it's funny because I'm sitting down like, okay, I'm gonna throw some radishes in here, and the garden's past just like come back to me, and it's really special. What's up, y'all? So my video got cut short yesterday. I had to take a phone call and I stopped planting out in the garden, but I wanted to properly sign off this morning, and I figured I would show you guys my seedlings real quick. Now, I haven't started everything I need to start yet, but I did want to get the bulk of my tomatoes and peppers started. Yesterday morning I had like a tiny little sprout, and now check this out. I have lots and lots of sprouts in here. So you'll see that I sow these really thick. I'm going to do this in a separate video so it's not on the end of a long vlog like this where people might miss it. But I do sow my things really thick, and then I separate them out. And that way I can start more under my lights inside before I move them out to my greenhouse. So I actually set my stuff up this year in the laundry room, which I didn't really love the idea of doing that because the light in here is terrible for video making, but it's just what I needed to do for the practicality of actually starting my seeds. And the reason I was a little late is because this room is cooler. There aren't any vents in here, and so it's heated because it's in the house, but it's cooler than the rest of the house. So I do have heat mats down here specifically for my peppers because I wanted to make sure that they would germinate as quickly as possible. I started these on Sunday, and today, no, that's not true. I started these on Saturday, and today is Friday. No, yeah, it's Friday. Tomorrow's your birthday. You wanna come say hi? Tomorrow's Benjamin's birthday. Tomorrow is your birthday. You'll be 6. Today's your last day to count your years on one hand. So I started these 6 days ago. The fact that I have peppers germinating in 6 days is crazy cool. It means that that's good. So I've got them underneath this light. I have a lot of different kinds of grow lights. I have plain shop lights. This is a VivaSun grow light, and I really like this light. For those of you who are looking, here, can I talk? Thank you. For those of you who are asking me like, what's your favorite grow light? I find that they're all pretty good. I like them all just about the same. I like this one because the size of it, it's a little more on the expensive side, but I think it'll last a long time. The only thing with this light is that it runs really hot. So you have to really be active to make sure that your stuff underneath it does not dry out, because it'll dry things out really quick. And I've got this one down here on the bottom. The reason I did this one on the bottom is because it does run hot and heat rises, and so I figured I want to put this in the coolest place in the room because I know that that'll help compensate for the heat. I've got these on a heat mat as well, and these peppers germinated in 6 days. Now I've already had to refill my bottom water trays once, and they're already empty again, so this is evaporating a lot of water. But for the current situation, I'm happy to do the extra work of keeping these wet if it means I can get growth that quick on peppers. Sometimes peppers can take 2 to 3 weeks to germinate if you don't have your soil warm enough. So far I've only got the tomatoes and peppers going. I have some ground cherries, which those have not come up yet. Ground cherries take a while to germinate. Some of the tomatillos have started to come up, and I started some amaranth just because it was one of the things I threw into this tray, and it germinated super fast. I'm going to be doing some more seed starting videos and stuff. I just got these things started just for the sake of getting them done, and I'm super pleased that they're growing well because I usually start seeds like 2 weeks before I did this year, and that's okay. It's not going to make or break anything to be a little behind. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. It was really fun to get to make videos in the garden again. Hey, do you want to sign off for the last time as a 5-year-old?
Yeah.
What do you say?
Bless you until next time.
We bless you until next time.